Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi, I'm Pip McKay and welcome to Evolve Now, where we look at the mindset and emotional intelligence that creates success and happiness. And on today's program, we're going to be looking at intuition, when to follow your head and when to follow your gut. What we're going to cover today is what intuition really is and why it's not actually your head or your gut. We're also going to look at the science of intuition and its higher purpose for us. We're going to look at why intuition speeds up decision-making and productivity, why intuition is not woo-woo, but a daily essential for success, the 3 intuition blockers and what to do about them, how to access your internal mentoring system and to start using it, and the 3-step process that turbo boosts your personal intuition. And finally, how to trust yourself in the face of others' influence, because this can be a real test for your intuition. It's when other people say something different from what you know to be right inside. So let's get started. I want to start by understanding and defining what intuition really is. A lot of people, when they go to define intuition, aren't really sure. They don't know how to define it accurately. So let's look at it. Intuition is accurate knowing without the use of logic. So if you knew something or you thought you knew something and later on you find that it was inaccurate, well then that is not intuition. That was just a mistake or guesswork that you didn't get correct. The ancients used to call intuition your inner tuition, which is probably where the word comes from. It's a deep sense of knowing that's about you. Now, what is intuition not? Well, intuition is not gut feeling. Intuition is not a vision. Intuition is not an inner voice. Intuition is not a concept. But intuition has to use one of those in order to communicate to you. So think about it. You could have a gut feeling, and that could simply be fear. You could have a vision of something that you're just imagining that might be a desire. You might hear an inner voice, and do you know what? It could be an old piece of programming from your parents telling you something. You might have a concept that you learnt at school that wasn't actually accurate to this situation. But the thing is that in order for intuition to communicate with you, it has to choose one or more of these things in order to communicate. So I want to make it clear, intuition is not gut feeling, but intuition may use a gut feeling to communicate to you. So I hope that makes sense, because gut feelings can be other things. So remember, intuition is an accurate, deep sense of knowing. Now, I want to give you an intuition example. So this is an experience that happened to me a long time ago, and it's really an example of intuition. So a long time ago, I was going out with a really lovely man, and that man had a couple of children. And the children were at private school, but that man was a musician, and he really felt that when the kids went to high school, he could not afford to continue sending them to private school. And there was a lot of beautiful public schools in that area. But this boy, he was at a private school that he absolutely adored, and it really, really suited him. But my partner was like, oh, I just don't think I can sort it out. And he hadn't told the young man yet. And it was quite interesting. It was almost as if the young man felt intuitively, the young boy, felt intuitively that something was going to happen, because it was almost heartbreaking. I knew that the father was thinking of pulling him out of that school, but the son just kept talking about over dinner how much he loved the school and all the things he was looking forward to about going to high school at the same school. It was quite heartbreaking. And I said to my partner at the time, do you know, what about we see if there's a scholarship for him, because he's bright, he's great at sport, he's a great all-rounder. And he inquired at the school and there was no scholarship. And then I felt this really strong sense of intuition. And I said, look, I think, but I don't know how I know this, I think there's this thing called a bursary. And I think that you should go and talk to the headmaster about him giving a bursary. Now, I had no idea how I knew this. I didn't even really know what the word really meant, but I just had this strong internal knowing. For me, it was a feeling. It was a feeling. But I also had vision as well. I could get a picture of this boy getting this bursary and the headmaster presenting it to him and him being able to stay at the high school. Anyway, my partner didn't want to go to the headmaster. He knew the headmaster quite well, and he really was embarrassed about the fact that he didn't have the finances to send his kid there, and he really had a lot of beliefs about not getting charity and all of these sorts of things. But I felt really strongly that, you know, our pride and all of that doesn't matter. What's really important is the well-being of the child. So anyway, time went by. And I got more and more concerned about there needing to be asked for a bursary. But I didn't want to harass my partner because, you know, we had a relationship and it's his child, it wasn't my birth child. And I felt like, well, you know, it's up to him really. But this feeling just got stronger and stronger inside, and I had this really clear sense that time was running out. And anyway, I said to him, oh, you know, have you done anything about that bursary? And he said, oh, don't worry about it. I sent a letter. Because he obviously didn't want to actually face the headmaster face to face. And I said to him, I just get a sense that that letter is sitting underneath a pile of papers. I could kind of see it, a pile of papers, and he hasn't read it yet. And he said, oh, no, I'm sure he would have read it. He just hasn't got back to me. There's no such thing. He's not going to give me a bursary. Just forget about it. And so I kind of put it on the back burner. But this feeling was still so strong inside. And there was one day where I woke up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I woke him up and I said, today's the last day. I can feel it. Today is the last day. Go and get an appointment. And he's like, no, I won't be able to get an appointment anyway, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, please, please think of your son. Just go and get an appointment. So he decided to do that. And the headmaster did have an appointment. And he came into the room and the headmaster said, oh, I'm happy that you called because I'm about to leave the school. And I would like you to play at my final recital. And I'm going to be leaving very soon. The deputy head's going to be taking over, and, you know, then it'll be, you know, I'll be having my farewell. And my partner, he got up the courage and he said, well, you see, the thing is, I was wondering whether my son might be able to get a thing called a bursary. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I sent a letter to you. Did you get the letter? He said, oh, no, there's just this pile of letters here. You know, there's so much going on. I can't get through everything before I leave because I've got to leave quite soon. And he said, well, the thing is, I can't send my child to the high school. And the headmaster looked at him and he said, oh, my goodness, I'm so happy you're here because we certainly wouldn't want to lose your child. He is exactly the kind of student we want here. There is such a thing as a bursary, and I can award it to the child. But he said, but it's so lucky you came in today because a deputy head couldn't award a bursary, but I can, and it's the last thing I'm going to do here. So the child got a bursary, and he was able to go to that high school that suited him really well and was very, very successful at that school and really, really loved it. So this is a real kind of moment of intuition. And I want to now talk about the science of intuition because it can seem a little bit woo-woo, how would someone know that? But I want to talk about what is the science and what goes on in the brain so that we can use intuition on a daily basis and start to understand its structure. So one of the people who talks about intuition who I really like is a guy called John Grinder, and he used to be a professor at Santa Cruz University in the United States. And he was also the co-founder of NLP. And what he talks about is, he calls it F1. We might think of that as the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind. So basically, coming in at us through our senses is a whole lot of uncensored information. A lot of information coming in at us. So you think about it, you might be listening to me and watching me, but you may not be thinking of how your feet feel in your shoes right now. You might not be thinking about your heart rate. There's a whole lot of things that you might not be thinking about because you're listening to me. But all that information is still going into the unconscious mind. And he called that F1, totally unfiltered information that is coming in at you. And the unconscious mind remembers everything. There's a lot of scientific research for this, that the unconscious mind remembers everything. Then what happens is all that information goes through some filters. And those filters might be our beliefs. Those filters might be our emotions. Those filters might be our memories. Those filters might be times in the past when certain things have happened. Those filters might be part of our personality. So all that information goes through those filters, and then we are only consciously aware of around about 4% of the information that is going into the whole of the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind's aware of 96%, and we are only aware of 4%. Now, you might have heard that the unconscious mind is 90% of the mind's capacity and the conscious mind is 10%. But these figures, 4% and 96%, come from another professor, Professor Snyder, at the Centre for the Mind at Sydney University, who I had the pleasure to interview in 2001. And he said this is much more likely to be the statistics. So that means that we are consciously aware of only a tiny percentage of all the information coming in at us. But the unconscious mind has this storehouse of all kinds of other information. Now, what intuition then is so we're consciously aware of this, and this is what we can remember and access easily. But there's all this other information. So what he says intuition is when there's something really important that you need to have a decision about, the unconscious mind gets all that information. It synthesizes all of that because, it's incredible. It's faster than a computer. And then it just gives you a feeling or a vision or a concept or a thought or a voice of its conclusion. But it hasn't shown you the step-by-step logical process it went through to get to that. Does that make sense? And I think this is really interesting in the example I gave. So, I used to be a high school teacher. Do you think I've walked into a headmistress's or a headmaster's office a few times? Absolutely. Do you think that I might have seen piles of papers on a desk? Well, hundreds of times. Yeah, that's what it's like, isn't it? So I would have seen that. Can I remember that? Do I remember the exact circumstances when that happens? No, I don't remember that. But not consciously anyway. But my unconscious mind has that as a piece of information. Now, I might not consciously remember what a bursary is or even remember hearing it, but I worked at a school. Do you think that there might have been mention of bursaries? It might have just been, I might have been having a conversation here and somebody might have been talking about it over here. But my unconscious mind knows that, has that word and brings it up in this situation, which is really important to me, especially since children and their education and their development and their happiness is a really, really important value of mine. So you can start to see how this might then work. And then in terms of how would I know that time was running out? Well, this is probably a little bit more in a different realm. But, the fact is, I've probably heard Jonathan my partner talking about the headmaster, how many years he might have been there for. Do you know, it might have started to make some sense to me. Maybe I heard a little bit about some health problems that he was having that I couldn't really remember consciously. But all of...
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.